Okay, this is assignment number 7, Anatomical Abstraction, the Grisaille layer. We're going to be using a monochromatic palette, which means one color plus the adjacent hues plus black plus white. In my case, it'll be blue. On one side of blue is green, which makes blue-green. On the other side of blue is violet, which makes blue-violet, plus black plus white. That's the colors I'm restricting myself to. Since this is a whale theme or a cetacean theme, to get my Latin out, I'm going to start with kind of a pale turquoise sea color. I might not wind up with it, may become gray later, but for now I'm going to use a green. So I mix blue and green and some white. And I cover my whole surface, pretty thick. No water, just thick paint. And I add some darker blue to it and try to get some modulation worked in. This is just so I have kind of a low contrast static hum underneath. In a minute I'll pull out a clean brush and fuzz everything up. There I go. Just to soften everything. Now I'm going to start with kind of an ocean motif at the top. I started off with a dark color and then I realized I want that plane to recede. So I need the back line to get lighter, not darker. So I just add white, and it pulls it back in space. And I put some darker and lighter hues of large waves in the foreground, smaller waves in the background. The wet end of the wet really helps to soften the hues as I lay them down. And then I pull out some lighter hues, just in the foreground, and some darker hues just in the foreground, and that gives me a sense of rolling waves. I decided to kind of improvise and do some teeth. You'll notice I start off with a silhouette. Then I decided instead of toothed whales I was going to do the baleen whale, which is a whale that has kind of a comb at the front instead of teeth to suck in shrimp and filter out other creatures that they don't want to eat. So I start with a dark hue and then I add light stripes on top of it. It's a nice contrast to the horizontal waves up top. Notice I lay those light stripes, which are kind of a middle hue, so that same background blue into the blue while it's wet. And then I pull out white and I give it a little bit of variation and depth with thinner, lighter lines and some darker lines in between, and irregularizing that top edge so that it looks more organic, using a smaller brush here as well. Then I decide to put a sperm whale, which is a toothed whale, at the top, and a whaling boat. And you'll notice again I start off with a silhouette. So I start with my dark, work to my light, dark to light, dark to light. Then I decide to superimpose those teeth again on top of the baleen, dark first. Notice how I go from large to small. Then I paint middle tone back in to get some variation in value, both up top and down below. And then I pull out my white again. So this is very much like the grisaille that we used in our previous project. Here I'm pulling out the white, wet into wet. It's a little drier, but that just helps the white to stand on top. It was at this point that my camera stopped working. This is what I wound up with, but I don't have any video. So what I did was I painted over this and pulled it right back to where I was. I also changed the camera angle. So notice I changed my mind on the teeth. Instead of having them in the bottom, I have them two at top, two at bottom, and one on either side. Kind of a radial balance. Same deal, some dark down there. I'm using black now, and some white on top. Then I brush in some medium, and I kind of refine my whale shape. The medium serves as a kind of re-wetting agent, makes it able to paint wet into wet again. And you can see I'm using a smaller brush and my maul stick to steady my hand. I'm not using it as a ruler, I'm just using it to keep my hand off the canvas. Put in some smaller crests on the waves, both dark and light. Some more detail of stripes on the boat. some lighter lights in the baleen and on the teeth. And you can see I'm kind of harrying up that edge. Then I put down medium, and I paint another dark underpainting. And this is going to be a sperm whale skull. So notice again, I put down a silhouette color, which is black in this case, instead of dark blue. Then a gray on top with the little blue in it. Then a middle gray, and then a white. And you can see how quickly I can get form by painting wet into wet. My teeth, dark, and then light. Very quick. I put down the medium so that everything would blend into everything else. You see I'm putting some dark shadows in the waves. It's at this point that I decided, I believe, to paint another skull on the other side to balance the skull on the left. But I don't think that I wanted to just draw another toothed whale like the sperm whale, which I could have done. But I think because there's baleen behind the teeth as a motif, I think it's important to have maybe a baleen whale skull in the other corner. So I put down some more white, put down some more color, and pull out the black to again create the silhouette of that skull. You'll notice because of the medium, it's somewhat transparent, and that's okay because I'm going to be painting over it. The main difference between baleen whales and toothed whales is the baleen whales have an articulated lower jaw, which enables them to open their mouth very wide like a funnel, as opposed to the toothed whale, which does not have that articulated lower jaw. Mix some more blue and green together, and some white. Just off camera is some white. So some black. And just like before, I mix up a middle value hue, blue and green, adding some white, and I paint into the black. And I'm looking at the form. You might ask, why do I do this middle valued step? Well, because I don't want the black to mix too much in and deaden my color, and it gives me some of those transition hues between dark and light. It looks weird to have it just go from black to white, so I always have a middle hue in between the two hues. At this point, I think I'm looking at the composition and thinking about that dead middle zone and what I'm going to do there. While I'm thinking the humpback whale or the cetacean whale skull is drying, and I can go back with a lighter value, smaller brush, and be a little bit more careful with my anatomy. It's still a little wet though, so it blends in quite nicely. Not using my maul stick. Sometimes I don't have faith that my hand can be steady enough, so I use the maul stick. But in this case, I decided to just risk it. And it worked out fine. Again, keep in mind that there's medium down, there's black down, there's that middle tone down, so everything's very wet, which is what enables the blending. And you very much are just kind of stacking from a dark to a middle to a light hue. Sometimes you have to add more. Now remember, this toothed whale was painted a while ago, so that white really sits on top now. So sometimes you don't want it to be wet. If If you really want that white to stand out, you can let it dry for a little while and then paint into it and just scumble it, which again means letting the paint kind of exhaust itself. And you can see how volumetric that toothed whale skull looks. Same with the teeth. So I'm kind of just creating some heightened areas. Because remember, in the Grisaille painting, you always want to have exaggerated underpainting. Now I noticed that this tooth was resting on the bottom, so I created some more of my original color, painted right over the bottom of that tooth because I don't want it resting on the bottom, and pushed the bottom edge of the tooth up. So the wonderful thing about painting is you can always change your mind. You're not stuck with anything. You can just layer right over the top. Going back with black and white to reassert the volume of that tooth. Again, I find myself resting on the bottom, so I pull out some of that background color and paint it over the edge. And while I'm there, I just pull some baleen over the top. I want you to notice that towards the bottom, that baleen kind of fades away, and that kind of moves our eye down towards the skull. At this point, I decided I wanted to have a humpback whale jumping out of the baleen / water. So again, I pull out my black or my dark blue, my black dark blue mixture, and I paint the silhouette. Pull it right over the top of the baleen. I'm going to regret the placement and the angle of that later. But again, as I was just saying, the beauty of painting is that you can change things radically. You'll find out in a minute why I regretted the position and the proportions of the whale. And then I kind of spread some of that tone over the canvas, pull up some of the baleen over that whale so that I have overlap again. And kind of finesse those colors throughout the baleen. Now I'm kind of refining the shape. And I want you to notice how I use the color that I'm using in another shape on other shapes. Again, use the color that I'm using on that whale, for instance, on the teeth. That creates unity of color, and it saves time. So now I'm going back in with a middle and a light tone. Now, this animal has white on its belly, so I can use pure white sooner. But you can see as I paint into the wet black, it creates some middle grays, some splash of water. There you can see I saw that the head was too short, so I lengthened it. And it was at this point that I was kind of upset because I didn't like how close it was to the sperm whale. I also noticed that in my reference photo he was leaning much farther to the left, not as vertical as he is in my painting. Injecting some more turquoise in there, painting over the edge, softening the area around those skulls, pulling the baleen back on top of the green, the whale's side back on top of the green. I just wanted to kind of inject some more of that turquoise. I like that color. And painting the baleen over the waves, painting some more details. I decided to make kind of a V shape by painting a tail on this side. I'm not sure if it's his tail or just a different species of whale, but I ran into an issue here in that the tail was too close to the right and there was too much distance between that whale on the left. So I move him back so that the distance is roughly equal between his nose and the left side and the tail on the right side. And because of this, I had some proportional issues. So I pulled the C right back over the whale, left the stuff that I liked or that I didn't need to change, and then pulled the whale back on top of the C. Easy as pie. It's just about knowing that you want to do that. And the reason I did it is because I wanted a better balance. And then back with the white to heighten. I'm going to do the same kind of heightening, pulling the tooth back over the tail for overlap, and then creating some volume in the tail with white. I also decided to put a sunset, so thinking ahead, I put medium down and then put white, and then pulled the whale right back over. Alright, so this is where I left off and where you should be by our next class. You can see the whale breaching or coming out of the water is much more dynamic and is lean than he was. There's better balance between him and the left side of the page. There's also kind of a parallelity between his body and the sperm whale's tail. We'll see you during the next class.